So taking a deep breath in and release, and just once again transitioning into this moment. Ooh, one more breath. And here we are. So last week we introduced Mastery of Impulse Part 1, because as we go through the sermons each week, we're taking two videos, 2 weeks for every tenet. So in January, we started with the whole 3 aspects of ego, then we went into Mastery of Thought, and now we're on second part of Mastery of Impulse, which is when I teach the practice as well. And so I just want to recap slightly from last week, just with a couple quotes. At this stage in our human evolution, we tend to run on habits of impulse, habits of desire, and habits of comfort. We react, we crave, and we avoid discomfort and embarrassment at all costs. The cost, however, is our inability to be self-aware and exercise self-control. So a huge understanding is the aspects of ego, where we resist the things we don't like, we grasp for the things we like, and we hold on to the things that we already have. And a lot of times what that just creates, as just a quick recap, that creates resistance, that creates suffering in our life because we're not honoring the transitory nature of existence. Everything is constantly changing. And one of my favorite quotes, some of you may hear this for the first time, or it's a recap: excitement is not peace, and pleasure is not happiness. Excitement is not peace, and pleasure is not happiness. If you've heard me say that before, it's still worthy to write down, because I want that ingrained, like write it on your arm, because it's so important to understand. Because when we realize that excitement is not peace and pleasure is not happiness, what ends up happening is we stop chasing things that are temporary, and we start to cultivate the joy in the present moment. Because guess where joy comes from? It comes from inside. Happiness comes from outside. Happiness is based on circumstances. Joy is based on your own inner being. Pretty cool, huh? And so that's just a little recap. And then, of course, we have Mastery of Thought, which is wherever our attention goes, energy flows, and how I started today's conversation with understanding how thought shifts, perpetual thought creates our belief systems, and our belief systems alters the way we behave. And so depending on our belief systems, it's going to change the way we behave, and thus how we show up in life and the choices we make, the interactions we have. Are we reacting to life, or are we responding to life? Who reacts from time to time? Right? And so what's happening when you're reacting is you're just perpetuating the same bullshit. You're perpetuating the same bullshit again and again and again, because there's no power in reaction. There's only power in response. Because when you're responding, you're directing the flow. Write that down. When I respond, I'm consciously directing the flow. When I'm reacting, I'm already feeding what's there. Ooh, that's a hot damn nugget. Response is directing the flow. Reacting is feeding what's already there. I just want to sit in that. That's so delicious. Okay, so taking a deep breath. Another thing to write down, this is a quote from Living Peace. It's a little bit long, but it's juicy. It's worth writing down. Habits of impulse, desire, and comfort. Habits of impulse, desire, and comfort. All fulfill one goal. All fulfill one goal. Satisfying the ego. And I'll repeat the whole sentence. Habits of impulse, desire, and comfort all fulfill one goal: satisfying the ego.
What page is on?
It is on page 54. And it's just a short little sentence that is italicized, so it's easy to find. Habits of impulse, desire, and comfort all fulfill one goal: satisfying the ego. And then the follow-up question is, well, Alaric, then what else is there in life? Because that's everything. Like most of our lives, it is about impulse, desire, comfort. I like what I like, and I'm comfortable with what I'm comfortable. I'm desiring, I'm following my highest excitement, creating the reality I want, and then I impulsively react to the things I don't want. And so it's just like, that's a lot of us. That's human. That's a huge part of human nature. And it's not wrong, and it's not bad. But there is another way to live. And that's what we call the higher self, or the self behind the personality, if you will. So we have the ego, which is all about impulse and desire and craving. And then we have that higher self. And so who's actually meditated before and you got to, even if it was just for 2 seconds, you got to that moment where you're actually observing your personality, or you're observing your impulses, or you're observing the identity, and you're just like, oh, I'm not who I think I am. Because think about that for a moment. Think about that for a moment, where we believe that we're our thoughts, we believe that we're our feelings, we believe that we are our emotions, and that's why they get the best of us. Something bad happens, we're unhappy. Something happy happens, we're happy. But guess what? And we're proof of it. This place is proof of it. When something bad happens, you don't have to have a negative emotion. So when something good happens, sure, you can have it. You can jump on that positive emotion train, but you don't want to get attached to it, because the moment, it's not going to last forever. And then it's probably going to be followed up with disappointment or that crash. Who has like those moments of highs and then the lows? That's you're riding that train, or you're riding a wave, I guess, more efficient analogy. You're riding that wave. And then it always collapses back into the ocean. But when you're living a life of inner peace, of inner calm, when outside it could be crazy as fuck, that's fine. But on the inside, we want to make sure that we're developing that calm, because the inside does not have to be influenced by the outside. And that's the goal. That's why we have our Zen training on Wednesdays. Sundays are fantastic. You learn this material, but I really can't keep an eye on you if you're doing it or not. Wednesdays I can. Or one-on-ones. But that's the thing. It's like, this is a lifestyle to live, because guess what? Why is it a lifestyle to live? Because it's your little everyday moments that create your life, not the big moments. I've said that before. It's your everyday little habits that create your existence, not just those big moments of like those big moments of success, or that moment of marriage, that moment of birth. So many people, this is a really good example. So many people look forward to the marriage, but then once they're married, they don't know what to do after. Or so many are looking forward to their first child, but then they don't really know what to do after, because they put so much time planning for the wedding, or planning for the birth, or the moment that they get pregnant, that once they have the child, it's like, well, now what? Because it doesn't stop. It doesn't, it's constant. It's the everyday little moments that create the life, not these landmarks. Isn't that crazy? And that's an important reminder of peace. And that's why so many of us feel stress, anxiety on a daily basis, because we're feeding that rather than our peace. Deep breath, please. And so I'm going to share 4 things that end up happening. This is all the new material now. Granted, I always share stuff that I don't plan, and that happens, and it's delicious. So understanding addictive and avoidance behavior. So rather than leaning into our pain, a lot of times we just don't deal with it. I'm looking at all of you, because we've all done that. We've all done that, where it's just like, we don't deal with our pain. We just want to it doesn't, let's just avoid it. Let's just put it away. Let me distract myself on social media. Let me distract myself in any number of ways. And so the 4 aspects I talk about in living peace is there's addiction, avoidism, escapism, and distraction. And this is written down in your little handout. So addiction is a developed dependency for relief or pleasure. Avoidism is subconscious or conscious denial of reality. Escapism is subconscious or conscious rejection of reality. And then distractions, any combination of the above 3 used to numb our discomfort. Few typos there, but that's okay. To numb our discomfort. So I've worked, a huge niche of mine over the years has been addiction. And I've worked with a lot of people healing from addiction. And these 4 things have constantly presented themselves in people that remain in addiction for years. It often stems from not wanting to face their pain. And a lot of times addiction often stems from, there's a huge stressful moment of your life and you reach for something for comfort, for relief. And it works. But then the stress thing doesn't always exist 24/7, because everything's temporary. But even after that huge moment has passed, you may keep living it in your mind. And so you keep going back to that relief, even when you don't need it anymore, because the hardest moment has already passed. And so you keep revisiting it, and it becomes a dependency. You reach for something that felt good, and now you want that same feeling every single day. And unfortunately, it doesn't work because it starts to lose its effect. And so you increase the dose, then you increase the dose, and then you increase the dose, and then you increase the dose. Instead of 2 slices of pizza, it's a half. And then instead of the half of the pizza, it's the whole pizza. And then you notice that it doesn't satisfy that hole in your heart. So it could be anything. It could be a substance, it could be a relationship, it could be being distracted with an activity, it could even be spirituality. People get addicted to spirituality and they lose themselves in it. So anything that brings you relief or pleasure can be turned into an addiction because you want to keep hitting it to feel good. But unfortunately, it doesn't work because nothing can make you feel good in a lasting way outside of yourselves. The only thing that can consistently make you feel peace and joy comes from within, comes from the silence within, the stillness within. Make sense? And so then there's the avoidism. And I love this, subconscious or conscious denial of reality, where you're just like, nope, doesn't exist. You just completely avoid it. You don't even acknowledge that that thing exists. I'm sure we've all known people like that, or we've done that ourselves. There's a few people that just said I was straight for the longest time. I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm married. So yes, the force can be strong with this one. And then there's escapism, which is often more common that you find in people. Escapism is you're very aware of what's going on, but you're just like, I'm not dealing with this today. Goodbye. And then you just walk away. Who's done that before? Where you're just like, we're not having this conversation. I can't handle this right now. So you get out of dodge. Escapism happens a lot in relationships, And we just don't confront things. And then, of course, distractions, any combination of the three used to numb or distract ourselves. And that's a huge thing because like social media, it's so fascinating, especially in big cities, rather than just being present and sitting or waiting in line and just looking at other human beings. You're just like, well, this is uncomfortable. And then you just like zone in, while before people would interact with each other more. And so anytime we feel uncomfortable in a situation or there's an awkward silence, we're like, oh, let me just check my phone. Oh. And so pay attention if you ever do that. Pay attention if you're ever in an uncomfortable situation, if you have an impulse to look at your phone. And my invitation for your homework is to not. Just sit in the delicious discomfort. And the more you do it, the easier it gets, I promise you. The more you do it, the easier it gets. Isn't that cool? Let's take a breath. And so now, let's go ahead and read that quote. The process of confronting... Oh, we don't have to read out loud. I'll read it, and then you can follow along. I'm so sorry.
They've been trained so well.
I know, the Living Peace Code. You guys are so wonderful. So go ahead, follow along. So the process of confronting our pain is a continuous one. Some days will show more progress than others. Sometimes just showing up even when it hurts is the bravest thing we can do. And let's go ahead and go through that once more. The process of confronting our pain is a continuous one. Some days will show more progress than others, and sometimes just showing up even when it hurts is the bravest thing we can do. So I really want to honor that. Let's take a breath. And that's something I preach till the cows come home. Showing up even when it hurts. Showing up even when it hurts, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's the last place you want to be. You have to have these hard conversations, ladies and gentlemen. You have to have these hard conversations in your life, because if you don't, it just perpetuates the conflict. It perpetuates the dis-ease. It perpetuates the stagnancy. We have to learn to be brave and to confront those difficult conversations in life. And we must do it from a place of peace, not from yelling. Because sometimes people take this in that other direction. They're like, well, I'm going to confront it, damn it. And then they lose their patience and it gets nowhere. And so sometimes...
Yeah, that happened today.
There we go. Thank you. Yep. Funny how that works out. It's like on Slushy. And so it's interesting how... Let me take a breath. Let me pause and slow down, because this is some powerful stuff. In a lot of ways, we're afraid of conflict. In a lot of ways, we're afraid to hurt people's feelings. And so we lie and we avoid the truth. And we just kind of like avoid things. We deny things. And in actuality, that ends up hurting people more in the long run, rather than from the get-go, when you realize something, you say it from the start, rather than living for 6 more months, 6 more years in a lie and an inauthentic truth, because you feel one way, but you're just continuing the cycle that you've already created with someone or something or an organization. It could be anything. And then realizing, wow, this doesn't feel good. And every day I have anxiety around this, but I don't want to hurt their feelings. So, or I've gone this far and it doesn't make any sense to come out now. But the truth is, we're all here to learn and grow, right? And so isn't it useful to have everything out in the open from a place of calm, from a place of peace? And sure, they may react at first, but it is so much more healing. And I think you can all attest. Wouldn't you rather have someone tell you the truth than continue a lie for 6 years or 6 months or 3 months or 6 days? It doesn't matter how long it is. But isn't it funny that you say, I want truth from people, but a lot of times we're not being fully truthful to ourselves or to others? Isn't that powerful? Huh?
You don't want that hurt.
You don't want that hurt. But it hurts more in the long run because it adds up and it builds momentum. And so it's like, I will just have I'll experience 10% hurt each day versus 100% at once. But then that 10% turns into 1,000% over 2 years, because every day adds up. And so that's part of mastery of impulse, is it's learning to not only just not react, but also to learn how to effectively respond and how to effectively communicate. Woo, that was deep, wasn't it? So let's now move on to the practice. This is just a wonderful practice that I've been teaching for years, and it's generally a student favorite. It's mastery of impulse practice, PPR. So anytime you hear me say PPR, just realize that it is pause, process, and respond. Pause, process, and respond. How do we pause? We pause by taking a deep breath. And scientifically, that actually helps you because it sends oxygen to your brain so you can be more logical and rational. Because a lot of times when you get stressed or anxious, you tighten up and you're not fully breathing. If you notice the next time you're stressed, notice the tightness in your chest and relax it. Take a breath. So not only does it send oxygen to the brain to help more effective thinking, it also relaxes the muscles, it releases the tension, and so you're having a physiological response to deep breathing. It's very, very important. It's very powerful, and personal trainers and fitness trainers will tell you that it's also really important while you're working out, while you're doing anything, you must breathe. Even during birth, you must breathe. And what is the first thing you do when you're born? You take a breath in. What's the last thing you do when you die? You exhale. And so life is just a breath in between. So breath is your most powerful ally in maintaining your peace. Take a breath. And then we have process. During that breath, or 3 or 10, process a situation. And here's a quote from Living Peace as well. And if you will, write this down, please. There is never a reason good enough to act out of alignment with peace. There is never a reason good enough to act out of alignment with peace. And you can challenge me on that. But I'll explain. There's never a reason good enough to act out of alignment with peace. Because think about it. Even doctors in life and death situations, they better be peaceful while they're doing that open heart surgery. Because if they react, if they freak out, then that's not going to be well. Because if they get too attached to the situation, soldiers, firefighters, policemen, people in life and death situations need to be able to master their thoughts, their impulses, and their emotions. Otherwise, people will die. And you might say, well, they're reacting to the situation so no one gets hurt. No, they're responding with mindfulness. They're responding with logic. Reaction is led by emotion and impulse. And that often leads to people getting hurt. It's freaking out. When you see someone reacting under pressure, what they're actually doing is they have deep training in responding under pressure. If I throw you out of the boat in the middle of Vallecito Lake and you freak out, you're going to drown. But if you take a deep breath, you can float on your back. Think about that. Breath can save your life, especially in the ocean or in the lake. You take that breath and you float versus, oh my gosh, and then you flail around and then you suck in the water. Isn't that interesting? And so process processing is there's never a reason good enough to act out of alignment with peace, recognizing that peace is the ultimate response. And even Andrew was talking about the peaceful protests that were going on. If people were reacting in protest, people would get hurt. But if you're peacefully protesting, people start to pay more attention. And you have thousands, hundreds of thousands of people working together. And if they were all reacting, they would not have unity. Think about that. Think about that. And think about every time you've reacted in your life. Didn't go well. And it just led to the other person getting deeper into ego. And maybe it did shut them down, because maybe you can react and you just shut that shit down. That gains resentment, though. That's not, they may be quiet now, but they don't like you. And so they're harboring that resentment, and then it's going to come out at a later time. So a lot of people say, well, the only way my children will understand me is if I yell, or my spouse. No, that is just, and I'm going to say it, but that's the lazy person's approach, because we're not taking the full time. We're not taking the full time to master a new way of communicating. And the truth is, sometimes that's the best we can do, because we're just so stressed, and maybe we are a single parent, or maybe we're having to raise 5 kids and then our spouse is out, and it's just, we're trying to make things work. So the fire comes up and we spew it out, and it's crazy. But also, we don't want that to be manifested into the subconsciousness of our children, because guess what? Then they're going to grow up thinking that love and yelling, love and abuse, love and verbal abuse is okay, because they combine the two. I've dated a man that, because I wasn't abusive to him, he thought I didn't love him, because he was so used to the combination. And so when I was fully peaceful, he couldn't even comprehend that, because he was so used to the abuse that came from his family dynamics. And so that's what happens when we're yelling. That's what happens when we're reacting with our families rather than responding. And again, I don't want you to feel guilt if you are in the situation. I'm just saying this because it helps point these things out so that we can work on them together. And because one day, I promise, you can transcend this if you are going through it. Or maybe you were the victim. Maybe you still have a bit of this in your life, to where you have this pattern of dating people who manifest in abusive ways, because you've combined love with abuse. Interesting, isn't it? A lot of people will say, once they raise a hand to me, that's enough. But a lot of people won't say, well, once they raise their voice to me, that's enough. Interesting, huh? And that's the funny thing about Andrew and I. Not one argument, not one negative word spoken to each other, not one raising of the voice. We've never had it once, because we've understand these teachings. And it also comes from our backgrounds as well. But everyone is capable of it. And that's the thing I really want to point out. We can all foster family dynamics in this way. We can all foster community dynamics in this way. We can all foster romance in this way. Isn't that beautiful? So take a breath. We went there, didn't we? And then, of course, we have R, which is respond. Rather than react impulsively, we respond mindfully. And guess what, ladies and gentlemen? You will not be able to respond mindfully if you're not meditating. Because if you meditate in the day, you're slowing your mind down so that you can then respond more effectively during the day. If you do not meditate at all, it's going to be so much more difficult for you to catch your neurosis, to catch you crazy. It comes out at the most inconvenient times. Someone just triggers you and you're just like, they said squirrel. Why the hell am I reacting to this? Because there's a subconscious root there. If you're meditating, see, psychic. So if you're meditating, you're going to notice, if you're meditating, you are going to notice the impulse start to rise up within you before it comes out. But if you don't slow your ass down mindfully each day, you're not going to be able to catch it in time. And so you're going to be aware after the fact. So that's why I always say start with 5 minutes every single morning, because you're going to be able to catch it more thoroughly throughout the day, then up to 20 minutes at some point. And this really is, to me, it's quite dire. But if you don't want to do it, that's fine. Because again, there's no pressure. But again, it's the option of peace or perpetual pain. Peace or perpetual pain. It's not right or wrong, good or bad. It's just this path leads to peace. This path will lead to same shit, different day. Make sense? Cool. And we'll probably at some point have like a whole class on meditation for people wanting to go deeper. But even just start with 5 minutes every morning. Just sit your ass down. And even if your mind is not slowing down, at least you're getting into the discipline of sitting still. and the mind will eventually catch up. So response, quote at the bottom, response is crucial because where our thoughts go, energy flows. Whatever words come out of our mouths hold energy, and that energy will either create or perpetuate the peace or drama in our reality. That energy will either create or perpetuate the peace or drama of our reality. If any of you have gossipers in your life, just shut that shit down. No more gossip. Because guess what? That is an energy drain. It's an energy suck. And so that's one thing. I actually, years ago, I'm just like, okay, there was always gossip in my life. And it was often negative. Well, gossip normally is negative. And I realized I'm just gonna turn that off. And guess what happened when I did? Peace. Because I noticed I would come home and then my biggest one was my mom. I'd always be like, oh mom, guess what? Girl, guess what's happening? And I noticed that anything I would see, I'd want to repeat. And it was coming from that discriminating mind of judgment. And now if I see something or if I hear a juicy story, I don't feel inspired to repeat it. I forget to tell things. Actually, with my best friend, who was my, I guess, best woman, maid of honor, best woman in the wedding, I'm just like, I'm sorry I don't really catch you up on too much anymore. It's just like, I just don't focus on the negative. And so it's like, I could tell you all these joyous things, which I do, but it's funny is like, we used to really go and it was always fun. We always had fun conversations, then we'd laugh. And then I'd always have some crazy stories to share. But now I'm just like, interesting. It's just, there's a lot of consistent peace now. And so that's why I'm not, going down these loopholes, these stories. So think about that in your life now for a moment. Let's bring it back to you. How much of the stories and the conversations you have on a daily basis are based on peaceful awareness or are based on repeating some gossip or a negative experience? And think about this too, is how often do you repeat the past negative experiences? And if it's a lot, maybe make a vow for a week or two to really slow down and notice that you're going to have a lot more stillness and silence in your conversations with people. And that's okay. And that's okay because guess what? I was worried I wouldn't be fun anymore. Because you get a lot of kick out of it, it's repeating your awful story can be funny as hell. Listen to me. Listen to what happened last night. But you're going to notice your humor might change a bit and you're going to start to feel more joy and you're going to be able to start to just experience the peace and the silence in relationships more. And it's different. So I promise that you're not going to lose your fun. One time I'm like a reality show. I'm like, oh, we should have a reality show, but it'll be boring because of peace. They just see us chilling.
I just think about applying that at my business.
I know, right?
No gossiping. There would be nothing to talk about.
It would change.
It does. Yeah.
It does.
Change relationships for sure.
It would. I promise that it would change. That's the thing. We think that there would be no conversation, but we start to get creative. We start to get creative, and guess what? We start to talk about intellectual pursuits instead. Think about it this way. There's this quote, and it's really judgmental, and I'm sorry. I'm disclaiming it. It's duality. It's not from me, but it's powerful. Little minds talk about people, and big minds talk about ideas. And there's another one in there too, but I can't remember. But think about that. Our ego wants to talk about people. But our higher self wants to talk about solutions and intellectual pursuits. And so you're going to notice when you start to shift in your conversation about away from people, you're going to start talking about more about ideas and solutions and creative projects and how to improve lives rather than just talking about Timmy over here. Did you hear about what Timmy did last week? Oh, bless his soul. Does that make sense? And so you start to shift the focus. And that's what's delicious about this. And that's what's delicious about developing a community that is based on peaceful ideals. Because then we want to create more events that help people rather than judging people. Because a lot of communities may have more of an emphasis on pointing out what's wrong with humanity and what's wrong with individuals versus on saying, you know what? We see that this is an issue and how can we come together to find a solution for it? Boom, deep breath. Isn't that delicious? It takes practice. So if you find that you're kind of, oh, it's okay. There's no judgment. So, deep breath. So we have the pause, process, and respond practice. Pause, process, and respond. And if you read Living Peace, there's a few versions of that last bit, the respond, because it can also go into retreat and reflect and all this fun stuff, but I'm not going to go into today because you can read it in this book, and it's quite delicious. So, taking a deep breath in and letting go. I just want to honor everyone and thank you so much for this delicious conversation. Hopefully it gives you some tidbits to contemplate and to think about. And so as always, I see you, I hear you, I acknowledge each and every one of you with complete acceptance and unconditional love. Blessed be. And a deep breath.